Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the foXnoMad podcast. I'm your host, foXnoMad Anil Polat. I have a fantastic episode for you today. My guest is Hayley Kennedy. She has been to every country in the world. She is the first disabled person to visit all 193 countries on the UN list. We talk about what it's like to travel with a visual impairment, what started this goal of trying to visit every country, what it's like logistically, what are some great places, what are some difficult places. We talk about a lot of things travel. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. I really had fun in this conversation. And, as we talked about in a previous episode, the number of people who have visited every country in the world is a very, very exclusive and small group of people. And I'm really excited that I have Hayley on the show to talk about it. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Hayley Kennedy. Hello. Thank you very much, Hayley, for being on the podcast. I tell all of our guests that I keep the pre-conversation very short because I get into these very fascinating conversations with people before I hit record. Um, and so I wanted to talk to you. I saw your post about visiting every country in the world and Libya. Visiting every country in the world is a goal of mine as well. I'm at 110, so I'm a little
Nice.
bit behind
Good
you.
going.
So, and a lot of the countries I have left are the difficult, what I call like the difficult ones, like visas or dangerous or, that kind of stuff. So, I guess let's start with your background. Like, I mean, how did the traveling begin? I mean, where did that all start?
I guess I always enjoyed traveling. When I was 17, I did a World Challenge expedition, and we went to Namibia for 5 weeks. And I just loved that adventure. Like with my parents and brothers, we'd done trips in Europe and to the States, but going to Africa was pretty wild. So I just kept traveling after that. Didn't really have any goals when I first started, if I'm honest. Was just enjoying traveling, was hanging out with friends, and yeah, then things just kind of escalated into going to every country. So it's kind of a late decision, really, to go to every country. It wasn't a goal I started with or anything like that. When I got to 100, I kind of realized I was over halfway there, but it still took a while to actually be like, let's do this. For me, my main priority was just that I'd found out I was losing my eyesight. Effectively, I'm going blind, and just wanted to see as much as possible before that happened. So luckily, I have done that, but my eyesight is, it's always getting worse, and I'm just trying to see as much as possible before I don't see as much or can't see as much and things like that.
Yeah, I noticed on your Facebook page, it says the first disabled person to visit all of the countries, 193, the UN list. And a few episodes ago, we covered how many people have actually been to every country. And it's a very small number. I was surprised, to be honest. I thought, oh, probably more people have done it. It's easy to fly and get places, sort of, and so on. So you are in this very exclusive group of people, and then you mentioned your eyesight. What is happening, and how has that affected your travels?
Yeah, I have Stargardt's disease, which is a form of macular degeneration. So I've lost all of my central vision. So life is very, very blurry. Um, there's not a lot of detail in my life. So I kind of wander around the world in my own little journey, seeing what I can see, using my phone camera and my SLR to try and see as much as possible. And you'll often find me taking pictures and then zooming in on the picture to actually try and get some of the detail that I can't see with my eyes. I guess it does make traveling like quite a lot more difficult. People use their eyes all the time to recognize signs, buses, Uber registration numbers, things like that. A lot of that is just totally not possible for me to do. So you have to learn to ask for help. It takes quite a lot to ask for help. I've never realized that, but I've had to learn how to do that. And generally, people are pretty good at helping if they know you have an issue and you need help. But I guess sometimes I am a bit slower to do stuff, or I can't see as much detail, and I'm walking around looking like I'm totally lost because I am, but shouldn't be if my eyes worked, kind of thing. So I do end up laughing quite a lot at kind of coming across very stupid. Occasionally there's a lot of tears with just total frustration, but generally we get there.
And so the way you've described it is the way I imagine it is sort of, when if you're just imagining like a screen, right? Like that's how we kind of see the world in this sort of I guess sort of peripheral vision and all. So the center is blurry, is sort of how I understand it. And then the peripheral vision is maybe a little bit clearer, but again, it's peripheral vision, so it's not like is that correct? More, am I on the right track?
Yeah, there's kind of like people always describe it as like a black spot, but to me, it's not actually black. It's more like ants running across a computer screen. Like, I don't know if you're a certain age, you know what the fuzzy TV screens look like.
Yeah.
It's like that to me. Basically, wherever I'm trying to focus. So if I'm like looking at someone, their entire face is this little blurry kind of fuzzy TV screen. So it's very difficult to recognize people's faces, like exactly where you're trying to read, like where you're focusing on, that's all blurry. So yeah, everything is just so much more difficult because you're missing that detail, that clarity. And quite often like I'll have to move my head around and, to try and kind of see what I want to see, but without seeing it kind of straight on. So yeah, things take a bit longer. Technology has kind of transformed life, like iPads, things like that, where you can make everything bigger. And yeah, so I think a lot of my travels and probably finishing has been down to technology as well, like still being able to book my own flights and stuff, and yeah, just help you're able to get through technology or other people helping you.
And is this something that progresses very quickly, or is it slow? Have you had time to adapt to the changes in your vision?
So I've known for about 13 years. So yeah, it is just constantly learning to adapt and getting used to change. It will get worse. So every day I look at my eyesight as this is the best it's ever going to be. So make the most of it, like each and every day. But yeah, at some point the world might go a bit darker, or it might just be impossible to even see as much as I can see now, which is just kind of a blurry life.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's interesting. I mean, what you've done with visiting every country in the world. When I tell people I've been to like 110, people are like, "Oh, you're almost done," kind of thing, and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." Like, there are some countries where it is very difficult to visit for a lot of reasons. Um, Libya was your last country, but at what point you said you would get around to maybe 100 where you started to think, oh, maybe this is something I could do. I, what was left? Did you have experience with some difficult countries in terms of visas? Maybe they're not as safe to visit and so on.
And so I'd still got quite a lot of the tricky ones left. One, I guess, that I'd done, which I hadn't realized everyone found so tricky, with Turkmenistan. I did that quite early on, and I did North Korea quite early on. But I still had, most of the kind of naughty list of the US to do, and things like that, and quite a lot of West and Central Africa, which is kind of the challenging visa region. So yeah, I still had quite a lot to do, and I don't think I had any appreciation for how many visas I still had to get when I'd reached 100 or anything like that. I guess I still hadn't really thought, yes, I'm going to do this. I was still kind of picking countries on a map based on, oh, I haven't heard of that one, let's go there, or stuff like that. So yeah, it kind of developed, and you just had to learn how to do it and do the research and work it all out.
So I guess getting those visas is sort of a skill, navigating the embassies or the forms that you need, that you sort of pick up along the way.
Yeah, what was more challenging was that I wasn't actually living in the UK, which the UK has a lot of embassies where you can go along and, find out what's going on and give all your forms in. I was living in Oman, which didn't have a lot of embassies. So quite often I was having to kind of contact a visa agency and say, hey, I need these 5 visas. this is everything I think you need. Please tell me if there's anything else, and I'm going to send everything to you. And luckily, I had two passports. So one passport would go and get visas, and I could continue traveling or, just living on the other one. So I was very lucky in that respect.
And so when you go to a place, I think people listening are probably wondering, okay, so, you have some vision impairment, and that is already difficult enough. Are you traveling solo as well on these trips?
Total mix.
So when you're solo, I find when I'm traveling solo, I'm much more hyper aware because even small things like where I'm staying, if I forget the key or I forget, I lose my phone or something, like I don't have anyone to, like, I'm really screwed. So you have
Well,
this sort of,
my phone is permanently attached to me. Like I cannot afford to lose my phone because that's my magnifier as well. So yeah,
okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I mean, how do you feel when you're out? So are you using your phone, you said, to take pictures and magnify things, like if you need to read something or if you see a site or something cool that you want to, look at? Is that how it works?
Yeah, generally, I use Google Maps a lot because I can't read a paper map.
Hmm.
So often I'm like checking I'm walking in the right direction. If the blue dot's moving along the blue line, that's awesome. And if it's not, you've got a problem and you're going the wrong way. So so yeah, I do use my phone for a lot of stuff. I always now try and get a SIM card or, like an eSIM in every country because that's where I'm getting a lot of my information from, and a lot of the things I can do on my phone make life easier for me. Other people, might just have the confidence to wander around, and if I get lost, I'll recognize somewhere. I don't have that luxury of recognizing somewhere because the likelihood is, because everything's blurry,
Hmm.
a lot of it kind of can blend into one. So yeah, it is really important I don't lose my phone or get it stolen or anything like that, because it is a lifeline for me. The camera, the magnifier, the maps to tell me where I am or where I'm going, kind of thing. And just actually, like when you're looking up stuff on Google or one of the search engines, like just to have something where you can make the screen bigger,
Hmm.
so you can actually read the writing, because you can't read a book or you can't read the newspaper, things like that. So yeah, my phone is literally like my best friend when I'm traveling solo.
And are there any settings on the phone that you use that might not be common, that you're sort of adapting the phone to help you better navigate or to
Uh,
read or things?
So I just have like the biggest font ever. So I'm pretty sure that everyone around me can read every text message or WhatsApp message that I'm sending. Or if I'm at work, people are like, wow, I can read your computer screen from across the office. And I'm like, right, got to remember to sit facing the wall. But there's nothing I can do about it because that allows me to get on and do stuff. So you've just got to laugh about it and not do anything dodgy when other people can see.
Yeah, I imagine when you're traveling and you're looking at your phone, people are probably, they probably don't like they're not thinking immediately that you're using it as to aid your vision, right? That you're zooming in on things. So you might be taking pictures of things that people wouldn't normally take pictures of. I'm just guessing, like menu signs or things like outside of a restaurant. Has that caused any funny or weird interactions?
A couple, yeah. So I often use like the menu to use the phone to read the menu and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
also, like a lot of the times, if you go into like a souvenir shop or something like that, the prices are really small. So I often use my phone to like zoom in on the prices. And sometimes, like for example, I was in like a nice jewelry shop once, and I was like zooming in on the prices, and they were like, no, you can't take pictures of, this is all kind of exclusive jewelry. And I'm like, I'm just trying to see the price to see if I should be in here or not, kind of thing. And they were like, oh, we can help you with that. And I'm like, no, because I don't want to be embarrassed, like I just want to
Yeah.
kind of get a price to each kind of thing. So sometimes it's just best to just leave and just be like, okay, not buying that today, and wander off and see if you can like find a website or something to get an idea. But yeah, there's always funny interactions. And sometimes I feel weird being like, oh, I've got to declare like my entire medical history so people don't think I'm weird. But, sometimes it kind of does help, and they're like, oh, okay, carry on, we'll just ignore you. But yeah, you've just got to deal with it because there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah, and when you're traveling, especially when you're solo, people interact. I find that people tend to interact with you more. Like you just have to interact, which is one of the best things about traveling. But I imagine in a situation like that where it's like the first thing you don't want to explain. Sometimes you just want to like have some chit chat, right? But you're like, oh God, I got to explain all this, and then it turns into this whole conversation that you're not a.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I've generally got used to it and kind of use it as a way to educate people. Like, you know, how travel can be different when you do have an invisible disability and stuff like that. But sometimes I just want to sit and have a glass of wine by myself and, just
Mhm.
think, oh, that was a cool day, or what am I going to do tomorrow? Or, try and work things like that out. So, yeah, in general, like really happy to chit chat and meet other people. But it does get quite exhausting, like when you're constantly explaining, oh, I can't see properly, or,
Mhm.
that's all blurry, and oh, I don't know what that is. So it takes a while for people to get used to the fact you are going to use your phone more, or stuff like that.
And has it changed how eh, you know interact with travel? So like does it change the kind of things that you find interesting that maybe you wouldn't have before, or does it heighten certain experiences that maybe you wouldn't have thought about if you know in different circumstances?
Yeah, I definitely try and do as much as possible. Like when I first started traveling, it was generally like, oh, I'm not coming back here, so I'll just see as much as possible.
Hmm.
But now it's very much the case of, oh, I might not come back here, but if I do, I might not be able to see. So it's very much let's do and see and try as much as I can, because it might be the last time I'm in this country or can, see what I want to see. So let's pack as much as possible in.
Hmm.
So quite often I can get back from traveling and I'll get to my parents' house and just be like, right, I'm going to bed, and they're like, it's 2 p.m. and I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm tired. Right. You just crash out until the next day. Just because it is so exhausting. But I do get back from trips and be like, wow, I've seen as much as I could possibly see and done as much as I could do, and I've like tried as much new food as I can and drink, and yeah. So yeah, just making the most of every day and doing and seeing as much as possible is just how I try and approach travel wherever I go.
And there's sort of this, I guess, stereotype of travelers or people in general now where everybody takes pictures of everything, even things they shouldn't, like fireworks, or they go to a concert, they're taking pictures, and then people. I guess the sort of the meme is right, like they're not experiencing or seeing things. Or you go to Taj Mahal and everybody has the camera, and it's totally fine. I get it. I mean, I have been there too and done it. Is that something that you know like I sort of I'm interested to know, you're seeing these places for the last time, right? There's some places you don't go back, and I find that I forget places until like somebody will say, "Oh, you did you go there?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I did," and I forgot. So the kind of things I remember that are left over are not the things I photographed. I'm curious for you, like what are the things that you hold on to when you go to a place? In other words, like you're taking pictures and all, but I wonder, is it a different experience? Like, are you trying to remember different things, sort of?
I guess for me, I'm trying to remember what things look like, and so I do take a lot of pictures.
Mhm.
um I also, because I have alopecia and I've lost my hair, I do try and take pictures of myself in places as well,
Mhm.
because I'm trying to help normalize baldness in women, for all those people that have alopecia. And, everyone can be at different stages of their journey. And just to try and normalize it so they hopefully will get the confidence at some point to go out bald, or, to just feel confident and comfortable in who they are, and the circumstances that have happened that have made them bald. So yeah, photography is quite important to me, but I do try and get back and then make a photo book of like the best parts of that trip,
Mhm.
with the main sites I've seen, or things like that. And then I can just open that book, later on and just be like, oh, that was a really great trip, I really loved that. I guess as I've now kind of done a lot more countries. I can't make one book per country because I'm often on the road. When I finish one country, I might be heading on to another one. So now it's more a book per trip rather than per country, just based on like time and things like that. But I do love looking back through them, and there's definitely been like a lot of my early travels. I guess I still wasn't necessarily comfortable myself, so I'm not in too many pictures. And now I've got to a stage where I am comfortable being bald and, you know, things like that. There are more pictures of me like in different places, doing different things, seeing different things. So it's kind of cool to see how that journey's happened in tandem to the travels as well.
And so when you travel, are you, it sounds like on some trips you're going to multiple countries in a row, like, you know, from you're staying in a region. Is that sort of how you planned your travels, or is it more hopping around, you know, just
I guess it varies. So I've moved around a lot. I've lived in 6 different countries. And I tend to kind of move to a region and then try and travel that region. But I don't want to do like one after the other necessarily, because I think if you travel like through one region without doing anything else, everything can get a little bit samey, and you might not necessarily appreciate everything you're seeing. So I do try and live in a region, but also travel outside of that region at the same time, either through work trips or just friends have said, oh, let's go here, and you know, we want to do a trip together. But also just have that break from seeing like the same things over and over again, or you know, them slightly different, you know. So I just think it's important to appreciate every country and not just travel a region as fast as possible to tick it off, and not necessarily appreciate the differences. A lot of the time they're quite subtle differences if you travel through one region all at the same time, but there are differences, and it's nice to appreciate those.
so if you were going to make I guess a book of the highlights, like if you were going to say, okay, these are the highlights of all of these 193 countries, are there certain things that stick out that you're like, that was a great moment, or that was a great meal, or more people should know about this place or this thing?
um I guess like I've realized that I really like quirky architecture, but also like quite a lot of nature.
Mhm.
So I've realized that I've seen quite a lot of active volcanoes as I've done my travels, which has been quite cool. And some, you know, you've got to hike all day to get to the top, and others, you know, it's a 15-minute walk and the volcanoes erupting, like Mount Tana in Vanuatu. And you literally just stand there wondering if you're about to die because you're watching this volcano kind of shoot rocks and ash above you. So there's some really like bizarre experiences. I really enjoyed in the DRC, there's Mount Nyiragongo, and you climb up. And when I did it, there was the lava lake, and you know, I'd never seen one of those before, which I thought was quite cool. But sadly, it erupted a year after I'd been, and it hasn't reopened. So, you know, I think you've got to grab the opportunity to do as much as possible when you can, because there's no guarantee that, like, actually you'll still be able to do it if you go back again. Because with nature, I guess so much can change that, you know, make the most of it while you're there, rather than saying, oh, I'll come back and do that in the future, because you might not get the chance.
And is there a sort of, is there any advice you would give somebody who's thinking about going to every country, or maybe traveling to a lot of countries, or just sort of extensive travel? Is there something that you've picked up that you're like, yeah, you should do this, or this would make your travels easier if you knew X, Y, or Z?
Um, I guess everyone's got to do their journey how they want. I guess the one piece of I guess two pieces of advice. One, just go and enjoy it. But my second piece would be, don't leave Africa till last, because I
Okay.
think you can get like, Africa can tire you out because the infrastructure is often lacking, and things are actually very expensive in Africa that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I think you can get quite African out, if that makes any sense. So I'd say go to every country. It is so worth it, and everywhere is quite different and has, you know, every country has something to offer. but do Africa in like small little chunks so that you can actually enjoy it and appreciate it rather than going, oh, I've got every single country to do and that's all I have left.
I'm going to take that advice because a lot of the countries I haven't been to yet are in Africa. So basically sub-Saharan Africa is totally open. Yeah, so I'm going to take that advice. That is good advice. And
Cool.
a couple of countries I'm sorry. Uh, uh, were you going to say something?
No, no, no.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, and a couple of countries in North Africa have been very difficult for me. I have had trouble either obtaining the visa or getting to these countries. One is Algeria, which has made it like it's sort of like one day I'm going to get that visa. I know it's just going to take me a few tries, for whatever reason. But the other one is Libya, which you said something that I think is really interesting that I've thought about a lot, which is there are countries like I had the opportunity to go to Syria long ago, but I was like, oh, that's easy, I'll go. And now it's considerably more difficult. Or certain places where war has taken a toll, or they're just difficult to go, visit, things like that. So Libya is one of those places where I had an opportunity to go where it would have been easier, and now I'm thinking considerably more difficult to actually go there. And then what is that like, you know, actually getting the permission to go, I guess the visa to go, and then once you're there, what is that experience like?
So I hadn't necessarily planned Libya to be my last country. I had planned it to be the trip over my 40th birthday.
Mhm.
It just happened that I ended up having time off last year to travel, and it was my last country. So I had booked with Lupine, and so they were in contact with the local company and sorted out a lot of the kind of technicalities with the visa. And once you got your code through, you had to go to the embassy and get your visa yourself. But a lot of kind of the hard work had been done beforehand. So that was quite useful. With it being the last country, I wasn't actually intended to tell the group it was my last country, although I knew Lupine knew. But one of my friends was on the trip who Libya was his 192. And so as soon as we got there, he was like, wow, this is your last country. So everyone knew because I was super nervous about it, just in case something happened and, I didn't get in or, there was disappointment because things can go wrong, especially when, this isn't like going to a country in Europe where you tend to fly in and I've got a British passport, so I wouldn't expect any issues. This is a country that, hadn't really had tourists in for, the last 10, 11 years kind of thing. So there was a lot of possibility that something could go wrong. So I was really super nervous. And even when like we got through and I had the stamp and we were looking for the bus, I was still a bit like, is this real? Like, has this happened? Something could go wrong. We haven't got to the hotel yet, things like that. So, it was quite nerve-wracking and there was quite a bit of anxiety around it. And it kind of took till the next day, like when we started to explore, to really think, oh, wow, this is the last country. Like I've actually done it. I'm in my last country. So it was quite surreal. But Libya itself, I was quite surprised by. Having lived in like the Middle East and in like the Muslim Arabic kind of culture, I was actually really surprised by how kind of relaxed and liberal Libya was. I try and get like a picture with my back tattoo, like because I've got the map of the world on my back in every country, or I have tried since I got the tattoo for my 100th country. But quite often you've got to kind of sneak away, and it might not be exactly where you want because you've got to hide from people because you don't want to be disrespectful. But actually they were super cool. They were just like, once they realized like I had the map of the world on my back and things like that, they all wanted pictures as well, kind of thing. So it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And everyone was super friendly. They were so happy to have tourists in the country. They really wanted to welcome you and spend time with you and talk to you. And it was so different to what I'd expected, having known that the country was like quite closed off really for quite a while, to have gone there and had such a positive experience that was just so different to what I was expecting.
And so you didn't feel, I mean, some places you go and they're dangerous and sort of it puts, at least for me, when you initially go to that place, you're unsure. And so it makes you just like, did I make a mistake by coming here? So did you feel that in Libya or does it feel like
No,
normal?
no, it felt. I've often found that a lot of predominantly Muslim Arabic countries are a lot safer than other countries, and I felt like I felt safe there. So not that I was necessarily expecting to feel unsafe, but I was very relaxed there, which had surprised me.
And I've heard different stories. I travel with a lot of camera gear, a lot of tech, and you do too, right? So you have your cameras. Was that an issue in Libya, or has that been an issue in places, especially when you take out like a mirrorless camera? I feel like that sort of sets off alarms for certain people in certain countries. Like, oh, that's a quote professional camera, so we'll treat that differently than like your phone, even though they both kind of do the same thing. But was that an issue in Libya or anywhere else?
So I didn't take my big camera to Libya. I just had my phone with me
Hmm.
because I wasn't sure.
Hmm.
And I try not to cause myself additional problems than I need to because I've already got enough challenges. I'm not sure if anyone had a big camera on our trip. Um, I can't remember any. I think people just had phones, and we didn't have any issues with that.
Okay, good to know. It's just interesting how different tech is treated in different countries. Like a drone, obviously, is one, but also like a mirrorless or DSLR camera. Um, so now that you've gone to every country, sort of what's next? I mean, do you go, boy, I don't want to travel anymore? People are probably wondering, or is it the opposite? Is it like, oh, I want to go back to here, or I want to see this, or how do you feel now?
So I have been set a few challenges by people, and I haven't decided totally if I'm going to take any of them up yet. The one I am kind of looking at the minute is my friend who's on 192, Gary. He has, and we're both doing it. We're trying to get every European passport stamped as we're both British, and now we get stamped in and out of Europe before they stop stamping. So that's quite a fun one, and a lot easier to do. Not really any visa issues, things like
Mhm.
that. So that's just kind of a little fun challenge. I have been challenged to do everything all over again,
Whoa.
which I'm not sure my bank balance or my patience would allow that, but we'll see what happens. No, since I finished, I have been traveling around the South Pacific, done a bit more of, I did French Polynesia, the Cook Islands, Pitcairn Islands. Total opposite side, I went to Antarctica. I'm planning a few dive trips with friends and a bit more easy travel for this year.
Mhm.
Hopefully not with a lot of visa or embassy trips or issues.
Mhm.
And then just kind of enjoying, knowing you finished and it was a super big challenge I'd been doing for over 20 years. So it's kind of nice not really to have a travel focus at the minute. And if friends say, hey, do you want to go here? I can say, yeah, actually, that sounds good. Yeah, let's go. Rather than saying, oh, well, it's not on my list anymore. So, can't do that till I've finished. Now I'm at the point where I can say yes to stuff,
Mhm.
even if I've been, because we might be going to a different town or a different city or doing something different. And I'm really looking forward to that.
That's nice. Yeah. You don't have to say, oh, I'm going to this country. And people are like, why are you going there? Well, it's number, 121 or number 148 or whatever it happens to be. Now you can just go kind of without the pressure of the challenge, I guess.
Well, what was really interesting was a lot of my last 10 countries were basically going across Central Africa.
Mhm.
And, I couldn't really find anyone to go with me. Like a lot of my normal friends are just like, oh my God, are you crazy? And then I had some friends that, although they were trying to do every country, they'd already done them. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go by myself and find a local guide in each country and things like that, which was fine. But as I was posting pictures, and I never post where I actually am, just for security reasons and things like that, I was then getting people messaging me going, oh my God, I needed to do that country. I would have come with you if I'd known. So I could have done this whole trip with like two or three different people I'd met, like traveling along the way. And I'm watching them do it now, going, oh, okay, it's, a few months later, but this could have been a fun trip to all do together, kind of thing. So maybe I should post where I am, but it just feels safer to always do it afterwards, which does mean you often miss people.
And where are you posting most of your travels online? I mean, what is your main focus, or is it social media, your site?
Yeah, so I like Facebook's really just for my family and people I've met. So I keep that one kind of private. My Instagram's public, and I tend to post my favorite pictures from like each trip I've done on there. And then I have my blog, Bold Blind Beautiful Travels, where I write about my travels and add pictures in that show what I'm talking about did happen, kind of thing. And I quite enjoy writing about like what I've done and what I've seen and things like that. Actually, it's a really nice way to kind of capture your memories while they're quite fresh. And then you read back and go, oh yeah, that did happen. That was really funny, or, things like that. So yeah, I quite enjoy doing that.
I will leave link to those for those listening in the show notes, so where you can find Hayley and see all the places that she's been. I am a sort of jealous, I guess, of people who've been to the Congo, because that is for me the trip. Like I almost have it like in this. I might even be building it up too much, and I go and it will be just disappointing or difficult or for whatever reason. But there's something about that place that I just really want to go and see the jungle, and just I don't know, that it fascinates me to no end. So
I mean, both Congos are very interesting. I had two great trips there. One to each, very much separately, a couple of years apart, kind of thing. And yeah, you should go as soon as possible because they are getting more popular. And what's been really nice is to go to a lot of places before you see hundreds of people's pictures afterwards. Or
mm-hmm.
I mean, before you've been kind of thing going, oh, I know what I'm going to see, and like everyone's doing a similar itinerary kind of thing. So yeah, try and go as soon as possible if you can.
Thank you for the advice. I will, and also the Africa advice. So it's two things are coming together now that I'm like, okay, I haven't yet been really to sub-Saharan Africa, and I want to go to Congo. Maybe it's time. That's the start. Um,
I hope you have a great time when you get there.
Thank you. I will let you know. I will send you a message and I'll say this was amazing, or this thing was great, or whatever the thing. There's always like a thing about a place when you visit that it's like that's the one like thing I remember. In years later when I forget all the other small things, is like, okay, I remember that thing. So yeah, I wonder what that will be with the Congos.
Yeah.
So
In the Republic of Congo, I remember I'd said, oh, I really want to do like a hike or something like that, like particularly to a waterfall. And they're like, yeah, don't worry. Like, we've booked a day hike to this waterfall. I was like, great. So we drove for like 5 hours, and I was like, guys, how long are we hiking for? If we're driving for 5 hours each way, kind of thing. And they were like, oh, like 10 minutes. And I was like, what? This is like the day hike kind of thing. And they were like, well, yeah, we're out all day. It's like, oh, okay. So we got to this waterfall, and I was like, oh, okay, where's the hike? And they're like, oh, the waterfall's there. And it wasn't even a 10-minute hike. It was literally like a 20 seconds.
uh,
And that was the entire day trip, sitting in the car for 10 hours, like on some of the worst roads I'd ever seen to see this waterfall. Not a single bit of hiking at all.
I like the mentality. They're probably thinking like, why do you want to walk when we can just drive right up to the waterfall? that that
But it's
that is
those kind of things you remember.
Yeah, it is. It really is those sort of those weird, funny things that happen to you, and then you realize like, oh, we are thinking different. Like you're just like, okay, this is a we're just not. And I love those moments where you're like, you have a group of people and they're all thinking differently, and I just like they're just looking at the same situation totally differently, and it's hilarious.
That was
Uh,
brilliant.
so I guess to my last question, is just wrapping things up is I always wonder, like, I've never had this issue, but I wonder, like, after you go to Libya, for example, and then I'm assuming you flew back to the UK, I don't know if you flew back directly, but I mean, when you're going through, passport control, or like when you've been to Syria, I mean, do they go? why did you go there? And does it raise suspicion, or is it, or when they see all the other stamps in your passport, are they like, oh, okay, you're just traveling a lot? But does it seem weird, or do you get questioned or anything like that?
So the only time I really worry is when I'm going through the state.
Hmm.
And quite often I go through on special assistance anyway, and I've got a US visa, and I always like get up to the counter and they're like, oh, why have you got a visa and what's wrong with you? And I was like, oh, I'm trying to see the world before I go blind, kind of thing. And quite a lot of the time they're like, oh, oh, we're so sorry, we'll pray for you. And by the time I think they've like felt pity for me,
Uh-huh.
they're signing me into the US and not really thinking about the fact I've been to all of the places on their naughty list. So that's like always my biggest worry, because
Mhm.
having to transit through the US, can be a little bit nerve wracking when you have been to some of these countries. Um, I mean, I went to Belgium like 2 weeks ago just because, like I said, me and my friend are trying to collect every European passport stamp. And I landed in Brussels, and the guy goes, oh, so what are you doing here? I was like, actually, I just want the passport stamp. And he was like, what? So he flicks through my passport. He goes, oh, yeah, you do have a lot of stamps. He's like, okay, stamps the passport. He goes, where are you going next? I was like, oh, I've got a few days here and then I go to Luxembourg. He's like, you're going for the passport stamp? I was like, yeah. He's just like, you're weird, go through. So it can, it can be really funny and lead to some really silly conversations. And people are just like, okay, whatever. Like, each to their own kind of thing. So, I mean, I like now I find the funny side of things like this. But like when I was traveling, 20 years ago, now that I have my passport stamp and my picture is bald there, but I used to wear a wig in like all my photos, but I'd often travel without a wig and just be bald. And I used to get some really like kind of nasty comments, and my friends would always send me through first because they're like, oh, we want to listen to what they say to you, like when you go through kind of thing. So obviously, like we tried to make it a very amusing thing. But I remember I went to Sri Lanka, and the guy opens my passport and he's like, "Oh, miss, what happened? You used to be beautiful." And I was just like, "I'm sorry, what?" He's like, "Yeah, you're in your picture. You're really beautiful." And I was like, "Okay, thanks. Please just stamp me in," kind of thing. And then my friends are obviously standing behind me, like rolling around laughing. I don't really know how to deal with those situations even now, but it's quite amusing, like looking back on it. So
It's like, is this a
it
roast or is
happens.
this passport control? Like, what's going on? Like, it's like so random.
Yeah, am I in a beauty pageant? Because I thought I was just trying to get into the country.
That is, it is hilarious. It's just, I just imagine probably, I always think of passport control officers, probably it's pretty boring. Like, it's pretty just standard. But then somebody like you has all these stamps, they're probably just like, what is going on here? They're probably like this country, that country. And you said you kind of bounce around from regions, so it doesn't seem to, they might just, it just is like a random collection of countries, and they're just like, what is going on? So I always feel like they take a
Yeah,
little bit of extra time because they're curious and because it's a boring job, I would assume. So
yeah. I mean, I haven't really had any problems except when I renewed my passport this last time. And I tried to use a blank passport and I had to have so many extra security checks. And so I don't know if I was just flagged randomly or something like that, or they were like, a blank passport. This is weird. I don't think so. I don't know. Luckily, it's filled up pretty quickly.
that is great. I really admire what you've done. I mean, it is very difficult to go to every country. It is a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning and logistics, and some of the countries are, like you said, not easy to visit. I mean, it's just very difficult, and I'm assuming out of 193, some are not as good as others, right? So some are not as good of an experience as others. So maybe it's discouraging along the way, but it's really cool. And you are in a very exclusive group of people. I can't remember the number, but it's not a lot of people who have been to every country. Surprise! I mean, I would thought it would have been like thousands of people, but no, 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 no. It's a lot less. Um,
I guess
so
it's the luxury of having a British passport, I guess,
mhm.
which has been incredibly helpful. But just that desire, like it has become my priority, like above everything else. Um, I don't think you can kind of do it half-heartedly and expect to finish. So,
Mhm.
it's been amazing, but I am at the same time glad it's finished, and having the freedom to choose where to travel with, travel to going forward, feels like a real luxury.
Yeah, yeah. Now you can enjoy, chatting about the passport stamps with passport control and rather than, having to hang out at passport control and you know,
Be nervous
bribes.
about getting in.
Yeah, you'd be nervous. Yeah, exactly. It's just the most awkward interaction you have as travelers. You go up to passport control and you just always feel like you're doing something wrong in some countries. It's like, I just want to visit this place, but they just kind of look at you, just feel like you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And it's like, no. Um, but yeah, some countries do passport control a lot better. I will say. Um, Denmark is so far the best one. Whenever I go to Denmark, which hasn't been a lot, but they're always cracking jokes. They're like so friendly. They're just like, oh, it's like I'm visiting friends. Like they're just like, hey, welcome back. What are you here for? You're going to this? And I'm like, wow, this is so nice. Whereas, yes, other countries, it's like, why would you come here? What do you want? It's like, oh, I don't
Exactly.
know.
Are you crazy?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, can't you do something better with your time and money? It's like, no, I want to see the place where you live. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I will.
remember when I was heading to DRC, I'd said to people at work, like, if you want me to review your contracts, you need to get them in because I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks. And, the standard, where are you going? It's like, oh, Democratic Republic of Congo. And at the time, I was a risk manager. And they were like, are you sure you're a risk manager? You don't seem to avoid much risk kind of thing. And I think from a professional point of view, they were a bit like, are you crazy? Are you telling us what risk we can take on and you're going there? So
Yeah,
it does lead to interesting conversations.
they're probably expecting something like France or Italy or something, and then you're like, oh no, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and you're like, what? I just imagine they're like, yeah, um, that is hilarious. But I guess it is good. I mean, you've done it, and so it's not as scary out there. I think a lot of people are scared to visit, a lot of the world, and um, it's you've done it. So there you go. For people listening who are scared, there you go. Someone has done it,
Thank you.
and it's been really nice talking to you. I'm fascinated. I could talk to you about all these countries. It's really I bet you have people too who have been to a lot of countries who are like, oh, when you went to this country, did you do this thing or what was this like? Because there are some countries where I don't know a lot of people who have been to that country, whatever it happens to be. So it's like when I find somebody, I'm just like, you know.
No, it's great, and I still like. I just started back at work last week, and I'm still getting messages from people saying, "Hey, can you come here tomorrow? Hey, why don't you book a flight here, or should we go there next weekend?" And I'm like, guys, I've got a job now. Like, I actually can't travel like I've been traveling for like nearly a year, and they're like, "Oh, that's not cool." But I want to go here. Where should I go? you know? So, and it's great, and I have such a nice group of travel friends who I've met along the way, and yeah, it's just so fun chatting about different countries and experiences, and laughing about how things went wrong, or just the funny things that happen.
Well, yeah, thank you again. I imagine people are like, hey, come on, I'm going to I don't know, I'm going to Mogadishu. Like, do you want to join? You're like, I can't, I'm going to Brussels to get my passport stamp. And they're like, ah, come on. It's just Mogadishu, like, come on, it's nothing. It's like Brussels. Um, Thank you again. I will leave links to where people can find you on Instagram and your site. They can check
Thank
out your
you.
stories and pictures um, and just read more about what your adventure has been like and also the upcoming adventures because it hasn't stopped. So
It
um,
hasn't.
thank you again so much for your time and everyone for listening. Thank you. And wherever you're listening to this, make sure you leave a 5-star rating, Apple, Stitcher, Google, all of those places. Thank you again, Hayley, for taking some time to talk to me. And yeah, I'll see everybody in the next episode. Thank you, Hayley, for being a guest on the foXnoMad podcast. And thank all of you for watching. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Or if you are listening on the audio version, make sure you give the podcast 5 stars wherever you're listening to your podcast. It really helps us get the word out about the podcast. Thank you all for listening. And until the next episode, I hope you have a great rest of your day.